G'day, legends. I hope that you're having a fantastic day and a fantastic week so far. Now, yesterday's video was long. Apologies, but thank you for the support on that and the good criticism as well, because it makes me go over things, rethink and reevaluate where I am, as I'm happy for my position and opinions on things to change as I learn and as I hope you guys are learning with me. And we all have different experiences through life, and that's what makes open media like this for free fantastic. Now, we have a lot to go. We're going to look at maps, both fighter aircraft in the air and that have been downed. We're going to look at the Crimean Bridge and another bloody bridge. We're going to look at boats. We're going to talk about Italian officials talking about where there might be some diplomacy with Russia going forward and maybe negotiations, and Russia summoning both the UK and French diplomats in their countries as well. Now, someone has pointed out over the last couple of days that I am too focused on manpower issues, and I think it's the opposite. I think people aren't focused enough on manpower issues for how long it takes to fix and the effect that it will have. But what their argument was you don't need manpower if you have autonomous systems like AI drones, AI targeting, AI weapon systems. Now, this is something we hear more and more about, and that is inevitably where we are going. The event horizon is going to be, we've crossed it and we're going towards AI on the battlefield. What I will say is we're still a long way from this. Yes, we know there is a degree of AI targeting, but I think that is just matching images to images. This is why we'll still see decoys, and I think the word AI is overused massively. I think there's AI assisted targeting, but this isn't Terminator stuff. We're not going to see in this war, or probably even for the next decade or more, a replacement of manpower by AI. We may see less manpower needed because it can backfill some of those positions, but infantrymen sitting in a trench controlling something or on the back end of a rifle, as much as I don't want to see men doing that, we are going to continue to see men doing it, and it's going to be incredibly important for many, many years or more years to come, and may become more important again as the offensive capability of EW builds up and can jam everything. We're probably going to be back to guys in trenches again with rifles. Now, something I corrected myself on, then corrected myself on again because it's both ways, is what I've titled here, this fucking bridge. So we need to come down onto the map. Of course, here's Ukraine. Here's the capital of Kyiv. Let's zoom in then on Chasiv Yar, and we know that there is a makeshift bridge right here that connects Chasiv Yar, like its main area, to this eastern part where we know Russia is attempting to break in. Now, there's a bridge on fire here, and we have footage of it. I'll show you that. Now, originally I said Russia hit it, but potentially Ukraine may have taken it out itself to stop or slow down a Russian advance. Now, I couldn't get this, and I corrected myself saying, no, it was definitely a Russian strike, because we saw then the truck trying to repair it, then burning. But now no one can get this. Speaking to Espresso TV, head of the Council of Reservists of Ground Forces, initially said the bridge over the Here Canal had been destroyed, indicating that it was done deliberately by Ukrainian forces. This bloke, the spokesman of the Kurtsia group of forces, said on national television the bridge was still standing. We know that's not true, but he said Ukrainian forces were actually repairing the bridge when it was hit by Russian FPV drones, with that truck dumping the scoria down into there. He also said Russian forces are unlikely to capture the embattled town of Chasiv Yar, where the Major General Skivitsky has said that not today, tomorrow of course, but all depending on reserves and supplies, saying that it most likely will. And even Deep State here has then said, regarding Chasiv Yar and blown up bridge, today head of security reserves ground forces announced the withdrawal of defense forces of Ukraine across the channel and blowing up the bridge across the channel by our own soldiers. So saying that they have moved across here, they blew it up, so they moved out from this sector. One, it was the enemy who struck the bridge. Two, defense forces did not go beyond the canal. Oddly enough, said denied this statement. So I don't know what has gone on down here, but we know the bridge is down. Someone's spreading misinformation. It's probably me spreading it because I don't know what happened here, but it looks like no one knows what happens here. So the Phantom Bridge. Now, the footage that's going everywhere, it'll be in the thumbnail of this, and I've strung you along for 5 minutes, but is Ukraine has launched more seaborne sea drone attacks towards Crimea. Now, we will look at this. There was a successful hit and some intercepted as well. So let's look at the successful hit straight off the bat here. Now, this is, it says to be a Magura V5 drone boat in Crimea. Now, we can see it here looking for targets, and we'll speak about this targeting in a second. So you can see the lights here. This is very classic footage of what we've seen, and sailing around looking for different targets, attempting of engagement here as well. And then we can see that it has picked a target of a speedboat at the end of the footage here. And then we see like a cam net on top of here, or just a sun net, and then hitting that, presuming that that was destroyed. We know the bang on these Magura V5 drone boats is a hell of a lot, and it would have taken out this. Now, what did it hit? It has hit one of these. This is a Russian Mangast class patrol boat. So in my opinion, that wasn't the target I believe it was probably likely going for. And we'll talk about that and the targeting in a second. So remember now, well over a year ago, when we first started seeing these, I spoke to someone in the Navy, an officer in the Navy, and said, what would you guys do? What would be the best defense against these? Now, they'd say to me, these are going to be a huge problem moving into the future for Navy, as the range, of course, of these is going to just get extended. They're going to get better and better. But what they said to me was engagement from helicopter. And this is exactly what we have then seen. Now, all this footage will be on the Telegram if you'd like to see it, as I will skip through bits and pieces here. But we do see a Russian Kar-27 or Kar-29 helicopters. I can't tell the difference between the two. Either way, doesn't really matter. But engaging a drone boat here with machine gun fire. Now, both these videos have music on them. I wish they didn't, because you can hear the machine guns then firing as well, both like a minigun and a classically slower firing machine gun as well. And then you can see near the end of the footage, as it is hovering here, it does successfully engage then the drone boat here as it is burning up. That said, that was awful close to it at one point with how large of a bang we've seen those have before. Now, there's a more footage here. The full thing, of course, of this onboard is going to be on the Telegram as well, as this car helicopter here is chasing this drone boat and having some difficulty actually engaging this. This would be hard to engage because, of course, something in the water is doing this and your helicopter is going to be doing this at the same time. It is going to be difficult to engage. I've never done the helicopter like sniping course, but I know guys that have had say it is very difficult, and guys who have done it on boats as well. So you're adding a lot there together, but of course, just massive rounds in the air. Likely you're going to start hitting it as well. Something that's fiberglass like this can have rounds go straight through it and not make a difference unless it's hitting critical components. But you then do see that they are having some closer hits, and by the end, it is then dead in the water. I'll speak about the missile system on top of this, and then they do have then successful death hits and have killed it then from there. Again, if you want to watch the full video of all those, they're all on the Telegram. Now, what we are seeing is on top of here, this classically air-to-air missile, but being used in a surface-to-air capacity. Now, this is an I've got this wrong. I think it's actually an R-73 air-to-air missile, similar to like an American Sidewinder. Now, what I said earlier was I said that you'd use helicopters to intercept these. What it's looking like is then Ukraine is putting heat-seeking missiles on board these for either aircraft like fixed wing or rotary wing to try and engage those. Now, these will go off and then the head can seek something from there. Of course, you're not going to have the amount of steering in it as far as the platforms and guidance systems you may have from a jet, what's coupled with a missile like this. And we'll actually talk about that coupling of missiles and how this will be massively affected once F-16s come in with systems. We'll talk about that in a second from one of my guys. But as well, get it in the right direction, fire it off, and then it can steer itself. They are highly maneuverable systems. So we see this SAM here. And as I point out here, there is a rail here, this hard point, with not one on it. So it does look like one has been fired off. We don't know if there has been any damage there, but it looks like both Russia have learnt we know they're doing drills out of the Black Sea specifically to target these drone boats. And we know as well, Ukraine has obviously seen helicopters and planes could be lethal to these, therefore putting heat-seeking surface-to-air missiles aboard them. So that is incredibly interesting to see as well. But this attack was strategically much less successful than previous. I don't believe that this boat here was the primary target of an attack like this. Russia says they took down 5 drone boats. We saw 1 successful hit. We know these boats work in groups, so we don't know exactly how many. But what I've spoken about before with these drone boats and their targets is I believe that they are reliant a lot on a target opportunity, that it presents itself and then they then hit it. So I think that a lot of these are going for a primary target, but if that becomes unavailable, then going for just an alternative if available. That's why we see some really high-end stuff hit and then some things like this. And I think a lot of these are going out into the Black Sea towards Crimea, probably for the Crimean Bridge. If that becomes an unviable target due to smoke or defense or whatever, then it will search for an alternative target. So that's what I believe. And I believe in this one that that alternative was most likely hit. I can't see the launch of multiple of these for that. Regardless, it's still a target that has been hit. But we need to talk about the Kerch Strait Bridge, as we mentioned that target in there. And we have spoken previously over the last couple of months, has the strategic importance of this now gone, and it's only symbolic importance as that connects Ukraine to Russia through occupied territory. If you don't know where I'm speaking, what we're speaking about is, of course, down here between Crimea and then Russia. And this has been reiterated again today. Russia stopped using the Crimean Bridge to transport military equipment to front lines and is instead using overland routes in occupied parts of Ukraine. Independent investigative group MOL4 on May the 6th, saying only 1 military freight train carrying about 55 fuel cars crossed the bridge in a 3-month period. Now, what we do know is Russia is now moving through the land here, as well as is building new rail links between Rostov, Mariupol, then Berdyansk, Melitopol, and down into Crimea as well. Of course, negating the need and how strategically important the Crimean Bridge will be. And this isn't anything new. On March 25th, Vasyl Malyak, the head of the SBU, said Russia no longer uses the Crimean Bridge to supply weapons. Before the bridge came under attack, we know there was the bomb on it as well as other attacks. Then it was 42 or 46 trains carrying weapons and ammunition passed there per day. Today, there are 4 or 5 in a day, of which 4 are passenger, 1 is consumer goods. Now, of course, that has had an effect on Russia supplying stuff in there. Now they've gone, we can't use this, we'll use, something else. But we can see that it hasn't had much effect then onto the front line, and then an alternative route has then had to be built, which is going to be much harder to take out, and if taken out, much, much faster to repair a road or train line on the ground rather than a bridge. And many are pointing towards the West, going, you had an opportunity to have a huge effect on the front line by supplying us weapons to take down this bridge, and now that opportunity is gone. I believe at some point this bridge will be targeted again, regardless of strategic importance, for those PR victories, which we know are incredibly important for morale, recruitment, everything on the front line. I haven't yet had a response from my lawyer friend. He is researching about the legalities now of hitting this. If Ukraine itself is saying this isn't being used for military items, they've said that, is it then still classified as dual use target? And he said this is a hard one because of dual use isn't that specific. A electrical station is dual use because guys in the army are plugging drones in to charge the batteries, so you can hit an electrical plant. Dual use isn't as clear cut, so he's going to look into that and give us an answer on what there. Now, before we have a look at the maps, I want to talk then fighter aircraft before we talk about a lot of ambassadors and this and that. Now, fighter bomber has confirmed that a Su34 has gone down and the crew aboard has died. That Xenia and Volodya, experienced, trained, flown, and combat crew, they died in battle, they died as warriors. Aircraft number 21, the same as the one in the photo drawings, paintings, and models. Many of the stars on the left side are mine. So these here. Eternal flight, brothers, my condolences, friends, family, and fellow soldiers. Now, there is a little bit on what happened here. Some Russian sources are saying it had engine failure and went down. Others are saying, Ukrainian sources are saying that it was engaged. Regardless, we know the plane has then gone down. With the crew being killed, I'm more probably leaning towards it was engaged by Ukraine, but that said, I don't know. How many Su-34s does Russia have? Still a lot. The tally of running of Su-34s that have been shot down, I would take with the largest grain of salt ever, because there's at least a dozen which were unconfirmed by either fighter bomber or photographic evidence as well. Now, speaking of Su-34s, this is likely from a Su-34 as well, that in the Kharkiv region, the first Fab 1500 has been dropped. We know that these Fab glide bombs can glide 30 or 40 kilometers, so they can glide a hell of a long way into these regions. Now, this is the Kharkiv Oblast, so I'm not meaning Kharkiv itself, although they could come in from Belgrade. Oh, sorry, I haven't got this on. From Belgrade Oblast into here. This is very close. I've got an Uber from here to the border before, but in this whole region is what we are talking. But this bloke is the head of the investigative department of the regional police. He put this on Facebook. Everything around shook as if an earthquake had started. Fab 1500s equipped with special modules so the bomb could plan in the air after launching from the plane, so it can move side to side, as well as GLONASS guidance. Weapons of such power were used against us for the first time. The only thing they managed to demolish was a villager's house and kill an 88-year-old woman. So that said, we are seeing then those weapons used up in here, as well as successfully on the front line of those Fab 250s, 1500s, and 500s and 1500s as well. Now, I spoke about surface-to-air missiles, and here we'll speak about HARMs as well. Now, the other day, fighter bomber speak about F-16s, and he mentioned, well, these HARM missiles are basically duct-taped onto Ukrainian planes currently. The reason fighter bombs at HARMs are attached to MiG-29s with duct tape is likely that this missile can operate in 3 different modes. Now, what a HARM is a HARM 6 radar. So it's going after air defense equipment. Number 1, self-protection. The aircraft uses all of its sensors to watch for radar signals. If it finds something, it can point the missile to it. The missile will therefore head in that direction and ultimately home on the signal once it can detect it on its own for terminal guidance. So using all these systems in conjunction. Number 2, target opportunity. The missile itself uses sensors to watch for radar signals. It communicates this to the aircraft's man-machine interface, allowing the pilot to decide whether to shoot the missile at the detected signal. If the aircraft doesn't have good sensors, this can be handy. So more of like this at the moment. Number 3, pre-briefed. Whilst on the ground, you use prior intelligence about the known suspected location of a radar and program the missile to hit it. Once the aircraft is in range, you just launch the missile and it will use GPS guidance to head for the radar. If the radar happens to be turned on, then the missile will use that signal for guidance. So it will be better able to find and hit it precisely. Otherwise, it just behaves like a normal GPS guided missile and hits the programmed location. This also means that if the radar moved at any point between the intelligence collection and the missile impact, it will likely be safe from harm, so to speak. So from the radiation that is then putting out for radars. This is how we believe potentially the A-50 had been shot down. Was the missile was fired in that general direction, and then once it had picked up something, then it had gone to hit that aircraft. Now, Mode 1 requires good aircraft sensors and tight systems, integration between the aircraft and the missile. So it's almost certainly not possible on a MiG-29 using Soviet platform with then a Western missile. This is why we might be seeing as well the iPads up in the cockpit as well. Mode 2 also requires good integration, at least in principle. So it's probably not available either. So let's bring up Mode 2, so target of opportunity. It doesn't actually require much input from the aircraft. It's possible Raytheon figured out a way to operate the missile in this mode from a tablet computer that pilots could just carry with them in the cockpit, which we are seeing, without interacting with the aircraft in any meaningful way. We don't know, but similar things have been done to operate comparable weapons with old aircraft, so it's at least possible. Whether anyone actually bothered to do the engineering work required, I have no idea. Mode 3 is bound to be available on MiG-29s as it's easiest to operate and doesn't really require the aircraft to do much more than just launch the missile, since all the program is done on the ground before flight. It's also much less flexible, thus on average less effective. Now, Here we go. F-16s can do all three modes, and it is likely why fighter bombers suggesting that they could make a difference there. So, of course, it's just full integration of systems. You're not using two systems and, as fighter bomber users, duct taping them together. So the existing weapons Ukraine has are going to be more effective on the F-16 than that same system aboard a MiG-29 or another Soviet-era platform, or maybe on a drone boat of what we are seeing. So let's have a look at the maps and see what is going on. So said the areas, of course, the red area is occupied since 22, the purple since 14, the green is where Russia has been at some point, either pushed back or has withdrawn. So Avdiivka front, and the only difference we see on this map all today is a push out from the west of Berdyachi, heading towards Novopokrovsky down here. Now, what we did see yesterday was in the same general area, we do see an advancement down here, as well as a grey zone shift out of Semenivka. And what at least I believe in here, and from some intel from the ground that I've shared previously, is there's not going to be a push through here. It's too flat, too open, that is going to try and engulf down these areas through Umansk and here to try and then cut off this and withdraw the front line back somewhere. So the change we see on the map today does line up with that possible then idea. That said, this map shows no differences. Well, the Surak shows a lot of changes here. So we have two maps here. The first one being North Avdiivka. Russian army made some advances out towards then this Novo Lexeljuvta. Apologies, I know a lot of people laugh at me doing this, but a small advancement out to here from what we've seen previously, as well as we do see this between Arkhangelsk here is a lot more northwards than what we are seeing on the Surak compared to what we see on the deep state map. If we take this road, for instance, that it's saying right down along here, I think that will likely be where the front line is sitting. And I think Ukraine will drop down behind this canal here as well, using that as a natural barrier. I believe most of the defensive works and troops would actually be behind there currently. Now, on the second map of Avdiivka today, we see showing very, very similar, to a degree, at least similar area, that then the deep state is showing down. This is Solovov here. So movement out from here. That said, a lot larger movement on the Surak shown than on the deep state. Russian army made new advances toward here, and now troops are less than 1 kilometre from the first houses of the locality. I believe would try to leapfrog down and capture that area as explained previously. Now, one of the areas we've been really keeping our eye on is up in Kislivka. So this is up in the north. We have Vilshana, we've spoken about, where Russia tried to get into Sinkivka, had a lot of problems, but Kislivka down here is where we have seen over the past couple of days, Russia make large advancements out here. No change on the map today. The only one was that one down in Avdiivka, but we do see then, if we zoom in a little bit more, this then on Surak. Now, what we did say yesterday with Surak was he didn't show the rest of Kislivka under control like MOD did. So again, this is showing very, very similar, except for the south area here, which even Noel reports is showing more in the south than MOD. But regardless, is showing that movement northeastern front. Russian army took control over the rest of Kislivka. Crash with the Ukrainian army are taking place now at the adjacent hills. So trying to stop that advancement there. Now, where we need to move is back down to the south just a little bit. There's no update around Bakhmut. As we spoke about that bloody bridge, let's have a look at this Pervomayski, Netalove front. This is important just due to down in this area, the links out of Donetsk as well down into the south, trying to close up this gap here. So let's have a quick look here. Situation northwest of Donetsk city. Russian army entered the center of Netalove and continued clearing the pocket south of Pervomayski. So this pocket in here, trying to clear out from here. This is showing fairly similar, as well as this move into Netalove, which is close enough on these maps not to nitpick too hard. Now, come down to Uruzani. We did see some confirmed movement on this map over the past week, past 7 days, but not showing anything today. Of course, Russia's trying to push back the ground Ukraine made in here on their 2023 counteroffensive situation here. Russian army made new advances southwest of Uruzani. So just in this area, this pocket out from here, we see where this road turns out then to the northwest, that pocket in here, which I believe this map is showing pretty much under the same control anyway. Now, Robotny, this is the area which I have the least amount of faith in anywhere, except for probably Krasnohivka. As we know, this map has just ignored that. But this, you can see, shows just so different. Let me bring up then the fortifications so you get a better idea. So these fortifications here are said to be fully within Russian lines on this map out from Verbove. This map is then not showing this, as well as Robotny itself. And then see where this road turns out. This is this road. So it's saying well past here that all of this basically is under Russian control, that the front line is somewhere out where my cursor is. Not showing it. During the last 5 days, Russian army improved positions. At the centre of Robotny, Ukrainian army withdrew to the urban area, the adjacent trench systems located to the northern and eastern outskirts. It won't be possible for Russia to end the battle for this locality until these defence positions are taken. Again, no bloody clue what is happening there. Now, Noel reports maps. Today, he didn't have any up. Now, the Russian Foreign Ministry has summoned both the British and French ambassadors. Now, the British Secretary of State, he stated that British weapons could be used inside Russia. Of course, David Cameron saying Ukraine has the right, just as Russia is striking inside Ukraine. You can quite understand why Ukraine feels a need to make sure it's defending itself, as well as the French President Macron again was presenting more talk about French soldiers inside Ukraine fighting Russia over the past week, but as well, that's been going on for a couple of months. So let's look at what has been said here, what the statements have said as well. Now, let's talk then about the UK and what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation has said. May 6th, UK ambassador to Russia, Nigel Casey, was summoned to the Foreign Ministry to be delivered a strong protest against the recent statements by the British Foreign Secretary David Cameron, which we just spoke about. Reuters regarding Ukraine's right to strike Russian territory using British weapons. Ministry firmly pointed out to Ambassador Casey that Cameron's hostile outburst directly contradicts the British side's earlier assurances during the transfer of long-range cruise missiles to the Kiev regime that they would be under no circumstances be used to strike Russian territory. By doing so, the head of the Foreign Office disavowed the position and admitted his country was a de facto party to the conflict. So saying if you are delivering weapons in to be used in our territory, you are then de facto party within the conflict. This is where it gets, I think, very serious. The ambassador was told the Russian side considered Cameron's words as evidence of a serious escalation and confirmation of London's growing involvement in combat action on Kiev's side. Nigel Casey was warned that any UK military facilities and equipment on Ukrainian territory and beyond could be hit as a response to Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory with British weapons. The ambassador was urged to consider the inevitable disastrous repercussions of such hostile steps by London, to urgently refute the strongest and unequivocal matter to bellicose provocative statements. So Russia's not a fan of that, knowing those weapons will have some success if they go in, as we have seen with Storm Shadow and French Scalp as well. So not happy about that with targets going in. So far, UK, America, France, Germany have not allowed their weapons to be used inside Russia, at least en masse. We see the Ukrainian groups that have crossed into Russia. Yes, we've seen them with weapons supplied, but it's not things, your high-end weapon systems as well. Russia, they're saying they're going to strike, but there's a strike within other areas. But again, a lot of this is just flexing. But regardless, that this war, and we'll speak about what the Italian defense minister says, there is a lot of room for further escalation here, and where that ends, I think people are getting more and more nervous about this. Press release summoning French ambassador Pierre Levy due to the French leadership's increasingly bellicose statements and incoming information about France's growing involvement in this conflict and around Ukraine. Something I want to point out just before we get into this was there's footage going around of a soldier KIA with a French flag on, and people are going on the pro-Russian side, oh, this is French soldiers. Lots and lots of soldiers around the world wear flags on their plate carriers or wherever from countries they're not part of. We know that there is a lot of training of Ukrainian soldiers outside of Ukraine by Australia, by the UK, by many countries, and a lot of these soldiers will be wearing flags or patches of which they have swapped. So that isn't evidence there. If they had a bloody croissant and a baguette and were I don't know, whatever, maybe. But it's the flag on body armor is just not. I've had plenty of random flags of countries on my plate carrier before. The Russian side gave its fundamental assessments of Paris's destructive and provocative line, leading to further escalation of the conflict. It was emphasised that the attempts by the French authorities to create some strategic uncertainty for Russia with their irresponsible statements about a possible dispatch of Western military contingents to Ukraine are doomed to failure. The goals and the objectives of the SMO will be achieved. So, of course, speaking about soldiers going in, failure, and with UK weapons. And Russia, of course, is not happy about that. They don't want further escalation of what's happening here, as it will affect their goals and how that war is moving. But I think as well, there needs to be a realistic assessment of how involved are we here? Are we happy with that going in and the war potentially changing? Are we happy with soldiers going in? I guess we'll see once more polls and stuff go out. And we know Macron's popularity is decreasing. And I think his whole thing about wanting to deploy soldiers is more of a grasp at that rather than actually wanting to deploy guys in. Said, we know there's manpower issues and that could help alleviate a lot of that. But of course, that expands the war from the West saying that we are not involved in the war, which I believe is bullshit. Of course, we're involved. If you would say Iran and North Korea are involved in the war with weapons going in, then you'd backhand to say we're not involved in the war. But regardless, I think this war has a lot of paths it can take, some of which are disastrous, some of which have escalation, some have better and worse consequences coming out, but I'm not sure which path we are currently on. So the Deputy Chair of the Security Council, of course, Medev, who always gives us something good to speak about because he's unhinged on Twitter, talks about this. The choir of irresponsible bastards from among Western elites calling for sending their troops to the non-existent country is expanding. Now it includes members of US Congress, French and British administration, and some madmen of the Baltic states and Poland. We know Italy has said specifically 2 days ago, no. They're also calling for active use of their missile weapons previously delivered to Ukraine against all of Russia's territory. So not happy because, of course, this is going to give Ukraine more of a boost up. And it's not the spring exacerbation, but cynical calculation of political dividend. Some kind of total degradation of the Western ruling class is happening. The class really doesn't want to make global connections between elementary points. Sending their troops to the Ukraine's territory will mean direct engagement of countries in war, and we will have to respond to it. Not alas, not within Ukraine's borders. In that case, none of them will be able to hide either on Capitol Hill or here, Downing Street, and will be a global catastrophe. So, of course, leading to nuclear weapons and that threat there. This is something that Kennedy and Khrushchev managed to understand over 60 years ago. That's my phone ringing. And something the present-day infantile morons in the power of the West don't want to comprehend. And if you want to listen to something really interesting about nuclear weapons and potential use here, go listen to Lex Friedman and John Mearsheimer about the potential of nuclear weapons being used here and what the response to that would actually be. And we've spoken about a lot of points of this before. If there was a nuclear weapons have no real tactical use on the battlefield, but a hell of a lot of strategic diplomatic use. But what would be the response if Russia in a rural area launched a nuclear weapon? What would the West's response be? And a lot of people would jump to the conclusion and say, oh, well, then we'd flatten Moscow. But that doesn't end well for anyone. What would the response then be? Could you be banking on then everyone goes, we don't want part of this, let's form a deal, or vice versa? We don't know. But John Mearsheimer, he, of course, much more experienced in foreign policies than someone like I, and politics, and, of course, much, much older and has seen many cases of this throughout the Cold War. I would applaud you to go and have a watch of that and just listen to exactly what he says. It was about 5 or 6 months ago in the Lex Friedman podcast. Now, let's talk about Italy, and we'll go over what was exactly said as well. But Italy's defense minister said on Monday economic sanctions against Russia had failed and called the West to try hard to negotiate diplomatic. This Guido Crosato told Daily this is an Italian paper, the West had wrongly believed that sanctions could stop Russian aggression. Now, we're going to go through these quotes, but we'll go through what was actually said as I've gone to the article itself. So he also talked about inevitably lead to a clash with other nations, as well as the counteroffensive had then failed. So we'll go through this. So this is the article, but I've had to put it into Google Doc and then translate it across. But what could happen instead, because we Europeans are fearful in supporting Zelensky's resistance? For a year, I've been saying that the result of the war is the sum of whoever has the most men and the most means. We spoke about this yesterday, what the outcome will be. He who has the truth or justice on his side does not win, even in solitude. So just because you might be right doesn't mean that then you're guaranteed to win. I argued in international fora and when speaking with Zelensky when he came to Rome that the Ukrainian counteroffensive would not be successful due to the Russian military's superiority and could be detrimental to the outcome of the conflict. But I wasn't listened to. This is very important. We know that offensive, yes, it got 5 to 10 kilometers in some directions, but it wasn't only not successful, it was a failure and, as he puts here, detrimental to maybe not the outcome of the conflict. We don't know there where that ends yet, but it's been detrimental for at least a year after. Little ground was made, many resources were thrown at it, and it wasn't ready. And that has had a huge effect on launching the offensive this year. Probably is not going to happen because of the one last year with less equipment. And of course, Russia has dug in and learnt what will happen there. So it wasn't only unsuccessful, it was a failure. And he was onto pragmatism and pragmatism's sake. Now, what does the Meloni government's 9th weapon decree for Ukraine have to do with it? So more weapons going in from Italy. We only have the possibility of helping Ukrainians to resist with every help within the limits of what is possible. This bloke was the same one who said that Italian soldiers will not be going to Ukraine. To have the time, the conditions for building truce and peace. So giving time for something there without a run over the top. How to increase aid, of course, as you can tell, these are questions from the interviewer. I won't say anything about the concerns of the decree because, like all the previous ones, it is classified and I'll only talk about it in Kospar. What must be made clear to public opinion is that in the military field, Italian and Western production capacity is, as is clear, much lower than that of the dark side of force. That is Russia, Iran, North Korea. They have transferred into war economies. Fortunately, our economies do something else. So this is what we know, is the production capacity of just shells, fabs, whatever other random bullets, bombs, dumb equipment is significantly higher than the West's capacity. Now, there's lots of reasons for this, cost, manpower, all of this, but that the capacity is limiting. This is why on the front line currently, Russia have a 10-to-1 artillery advantage. Of course, like he said in one of these other ones here, we'll go over that there's a lot of reliance on, where was it? Sanctions could not stop Russia. Wrongly believed sanctions could stop Russian aggression, that these sanctions would affect the economy so much that then it would have to have a pullback and then Russia would have to seek a peace or pull back from there. So, meanwhile, nothing to stop. Meanwhile, the sanctions of Russia have had no effect, and Gazprom, of course, Russia's oil gas giant, does more business than ever. Saying, but if we can't tax the giants of the web, what they belong to the West, as we think we can stop economically those states such as Russia, which, moreover, they trade with the entire globe, which the West is now a small part. And this is something that I think the West in the future is going to have to come to terms with, that we are not the West and the globe. It is rising around globally, which is great because it's bringing a lot of people out of desperate situations and poverty. It's a fantastic thing that everyone is living better, but the global dominance of the West is becoming less and less, especially economically as well. So this is what we are seeing. So are we deluded about the sanctions? Many times we behave as if the world didn't exist, changed. So, of course, there's been changes throughout history. We are like those French nobles who did not realise that their palaces would not defend them from a new class of hungry people that was about to arrive. We always thought that was enough, the West, to stop Russia, and the sanctions are the result of the fact that we are still stuck in the idea that the world is our world. So these sanctions would have such an effect on Russia, got nowhere to sell the oil, they have no money, can't launch a war, and it would all collapse. So the sanctions have had nowhere near the effect that we thought they would have. Now, I'm going to say something controversial, and some may disagree, some may agree. I think the West now has its hand tied. I think the West knew militarily that funding Ukraine would never win in a military, strategic, tactical sense. But where I think they thought they would win is we can't push Russia back, but we can make Russia withdraw. We choke them with sanctions, we give good weapons in, and they will have to withdraw out rather than a frontline pushback, if that makes sense. We relied more on Russia collapsing than a Ukrainian push over the top, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm wrong there, maybe you'll disagree. Again, this is a safe space to disagree, although I hate the bloody term safe space, but that's what I think was more relied on. As we have seen over the past century, we have seen 2 large revolutions and massive changes in Russia trying to push something like that again, but it doesn't seem to be working, and now we're stuck in a war of attrition where nothing is bloody moving. Anyway, instead, the world is much bigger, and we can only solve this crisis too involving everyone, first with a truce and then with peace. Look, Putin has never given any signs of wanting to negotiate. I will disagree with the interviewer here. Putin, in many interviews and whatever, has spoken about the willingness to negotiate. We saw that in Turkey with the old Israeli PM as well. But again, we don't know how official negotiations. We don't know anyway. But we do know he was willing to come to the table and says in many things that he still is. Anyway, saying it is a good reason to work harder. We must not give up. So I've got the next one here. Sorry, it just cut off. It's a good reason to work harder. So he meaning diplomatic relations. We must not give up on every possible path and opening even narrow ones of diplomacy. So I think very interesting there. And I think points out some big things that he speaks about opening up diplomacy and seeing the war. He's speaking about truthfully about the offensive. And it's very interesting, someone of this stature, this influence, speaking specifically about this and the failure of the sanctions as well. And yes, they're having effect, but nowhere near the effect of it. And like I spoke about, I think there was more reliance on having a Russian collapse of the front rather than a Ukrainian victory at the front. And the further and further we get down the line, I actually think the less and less likely that is becoming. Like I said yesterday in this war, I think wherever this war ends, we will go, we could have had that outcome 500,000 or 1 million men ago. Anyway, legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Sorry this one was long. If you've got to this point, bloody hell, you're a legend. Anyway, look after yourselves. I'll speak to you very, very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.